Steve?
No.
I have not seen Mr. Steve.
Miss Donna, we've got a problem.
Yes.
I can't find Mr. Steve.
Mr. Steve Zook?
Yes!
He's on a mission trip.
Oh!
He's on a mission trip. He is.
Where? They let him out of the country?
I don't know where.
Interesting.
I don't know where Mr. Steve is. If you're the first one to guess where Mr. Steve is, you'll get a Ritter's gift card. Good luck.
Whoa. Hi, everybody. I'm Miss Joy. I was just kind of looking to see if I could figure out where Mr. Steve might be. It's a mystery. It's kind of a problem. You know, I have another problem. I've been playing this word game on my phone, and they give me these letters, and I have to figure out the word. I have to figure out a word that would come between bide and side, and I can't figure it out. I wonder who could help me solve it. That makes me think. In the Bible, there's stories about people that have problems and they find someone to help solve them. Our story today comes from the book of Mark, but it's also in the book of Matthew and it's in the book of Luke. Remember, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are the Gospels, and they're the story about when Jesus was here on earth. And in Mark, it was interesting because the note in my Bible says that Mark talks more about miracles, has more miracles than any other gospel. And I know last week Mr. Steve talked about a miracle about the 10 men that were healed from leprosy. Now, there's 4 different kinds of miracles. Jesus performed miracles over nature. In fact, right before our story today, he calmed the sea. They were out in the boat in the night. Jesus was sleeping, a storm came up, and the disciples were afraid. But that's another story. Jesus also performed miracles over sickness. We'll talk about that later on. He also performed miracles and cast out evil spirits. And then he also could perform miracles over death, and we'll talk about that. Our story today starts, Jesus had been preaching and teaching, and he was tired, and he said to the disciples, let's get in the boat and go to the other side of the sea. Now, in those days, people had heard about Jesus and all the miracles, so there were great crowds that would follow him. So they got in the boat and went to the other side of the sea, and when they got out of the boat, there were crowds of people surrounding Jesus. And there was a man named Jairus who kind of worked his way through the crowd. And when the Bible says, seeing Jesus, he fell at his feet, Jesus's feet, and he pleaded. He said, oh, my daughter is very ill. She's going to die. Jesus, can you come to my house and touch her? Because he knew that if Jesus could touch her, she would be healed. So Jesus started to go to Jairus' house. And as the crowd was moving with him, as they were going to Jairus' house, there was a woman in the crowd. She had been sick for 12 years. She had gone to doctor after doctor after doctor, and no one could heal her. And she'd heard that Jesus was going to be there. So she thought, if I could just touch Jesus' garment, I know he could heal me. So she kind of made her way through the crowd, and she reached up and she touched Jesus' garment. And the minute she did that, Jesus stopped, because he could feel the power going out of him. And he said, who touched me? And the poor woman was afraid. She thought, oh no, he's going to be upset with me. Finally, she said, Jesus, it was I. I've been sick for 12 years, and you are my only hope. You're the only one that can solve my problem. And you know what? Jesus wasn't mad at her. He said, daughter, your faith has healed you. And they started on to Jairus' house. Now, as they were getting closer to Jairus' house, some of Jairus' friends came to him and said, "Don't bother him because your daughter has died." Can you imagine how Jairus must have felt? His daughter, who was about 12 years old, had died. You know, Jesus turned to him and he said, "Don't be afraid, just believe." And they went on to Jairus' house. Now, when they got there, there was a crowd of people, because in those days when someone died, they would have people that would come and mourn, and they would cry and they would wail. Wail is like really loud crying. And all these people were there mourning this poor little girl that had died. And Jesus said to them, "Why are you doing this? She's not dead, she's just asleep." And do you know what the Bible says? The Bible says they laughed at him. But Jesus didn't let that bother him. He sent them all away, and he took the father and the mother and the disciples that were with him and said, "Come with me." And they went to the room where the little girl was. And he took her hand and he said, "Little girl, get up." You know what? That little girl got up right away and she was walking around. They were all astonished. Now Jesus told them, "Don't tell anybody," because he was kind of afraid that people were out to get him and it wasn't his time yet. But he said to him, "She's hungry, give her something to eat." Do you know, both the woman that touched Jesus' garment and Jairus had faith. They believed that Jesus could solve their problems. And you know what? Even today, Jesus can solve our problems if we have faith. So I want you to think this week about, if I have a problem, who can I go to? Now, you can go to your mom or your dad, or maybe a teacher, or maybe a Sunday school teacher, and talk to them about your problem. But you know, most important, you can go to Jesus, because Jesus can solve our problems if we have faith and believe. That's all. See you later.